Hi there. Welcome to the OFM podcast where metabolic health matters. I'm your host, Peter Defty, General Manager of Vespa, that right there, and a pioneering person who started this whole crazy thing about optimizing your fat metabolism to reach metabolic health. And today I'm bringing in Bryce Thatcher currently of UltrAspire. And we're going to go back because Bryce has a huge history. We're going to talk about innovators, innovation, and why it's important that the general public really start to understand that journey of curiosity and innovation, because there's too little of it going on today. And people don't realize where that's taking us. And you can even see it like in tech. Most of tech today, it's stalled in the last 5 to 10 years, and it's just reiterations, but you're seeing this same stagnation with companies like Boeing. You're seeing in the pharmaceutical industry with just making formula changes. They can repatent and do it. It's kind of going across, and we'll talk more about the what the ramifications of those are and how they happen later. But Bryce is an innovator. I've known Bryce for, about 10, 12, 14 years, met him. I knew of his stuff before I actually met him, but I met him at a running trade show. And I just kind of got this thing about his body language, the questions he asked, and how he was like, okay, this guy has really got something different going on. Then I found out through talking with him that he's the guy that created, for the ultra runners, if you're into ultra running and trail running and outdoor sports, he's the guy that created all these handheld water bottles, vests, packs, whatever. I think I'm going to let him tell you what he's invented, but he's actually the guy that kind of invented the whole sphere of hydration and this sort of thing. Is that correct, Bryce?
Yes, correct.
Right. So, I think he's got some pretty crazy stories, and this is why we're going to talk about these crazy journeys that you probably didn't plan this, did you?
No.
Right. This is how innovation works, and how we've got to get back to people using their big brains, being curious and starting to innovate. So Bryce, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on here. This is a podcast I've been wanting to do for like 5 or 6 years.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And I met Peter a few years ago as well too. And we have like minds. We like to create.
Yeah, just in different areas, but it's like
different areas. Yeah. It's fun to talk.
Yeah, it's crazy. So currently you are the president of UltrAspire.
Yeah, actually, Kevin Robinson is our president. I have taken on the role pretty much full-time product development and founder of UltrAspire. And so Kevin has taken on day-to-day responsibilities, and I'm doing the innovation for the company, which is a great.
But you were president for quite a while.
Yes, exactly. I founded it 2013. This is our 10th anniversary for UltrAspire. And, prior to that, I kind of have a long history, and I can kind of go in a little bit of history if you'd like, and just kind of give you the background.
I do want to hear your history. Like, I don't know if you remember the Looney Tunes, Tasmanian Devil, Bugs Bunny, and
right.
He gets the Tasmanian Devil to sit on a couch and Bugs Bunny presents, he's like Sigmund Freud, and he says, tell me about your id when you was a kid. So
yeah.
I kind of even want to go back there, but let's start with what triggered you to go into to get where you are today, that this journey that you're on with being the leader, the actual way out front leader in hydration products.
I think that it really begins with my passion in sport and running. I grew up in the Tetons, on the Idaho side of the Tetons, and I would look up there and look at the mountains, and I love to hike and I love to run. And I would go out with my dad, and we would do what's called double time. And this would have been back in the 70s. And he would say, okay, we're going to run 20 steps, walk 20 steps, run 20 steps, walk 20 steps. And we would do backpacking trips, carrying backpacks. And I really was intrigued by time. I like to cover certain sections of trail as fast as I could. And this kind of evolved over time to where I got into rock climbing a lot, and then trail running in general. And at the time I was running a lot, climbing a lot, and I had a hard time finding climbing partners. And so I started running the mountains a lot, and then just free soloing the mountains. And so this would have been late 1970s. I was running in the Tetons and trying to set records for speed ascent descent. Now they call them FKTs in the Tetons. And one day I was running, I had this old Camp Trails backpack, and I ran to the top of the Grand Teton and back again. And it was an orange Camp Trails backpack, and it had a little zippered pocket in the front and a drawstring cord. And to keep it from bouncing all over my back, I would hold on to the shoulder straps like this with my hands and just run the best I could. And then I would just run until I, couldn't run anymore. And I'd have to take the pack off, open up the zippered pocket, pull out a water bottle, drink a little bit of water, put it back in again, then go again. And it was driving me crazy because—
And what kind of water bottle was it? Because I mean, my friend Bruce LaBelle, who's a Western States legend, who was running in the late 70s, early 80s, and one of the top runners, it was like he was a PhD student at Davis in organic chemistry. So he used a lab squirter bottle, but other people used Aunt Jemima stuff. So what was your water bottle?
Well, actually what I was really probably a dumb kid, but I was using an apple juice bottle. So it's glass, actually, and not very smart. Yeah. Okay. And then it evolved to where I went into a flip top bicycle water bottle, and that worked as well too. But it was when I was out running that it was just, I was annoyed by how much time it took and how I would totally dehydrate myself because it was such a chore to try to drink. And so that's when I came home. I'd grown up in a home where I would spend a lot of time doing crafts and things like that. My mom had taught me how to sew. My grandmother had taught me how to sew on a treadle sewing machine. And so it was one Sunday afternoon, I had the running going on one side, and I wanted to create something that would allow me. And so I took some old Levi's and cut them up Sunday afternoon, sewed together a little pack that allowed me to carry a water bottle on my waist. And that way I figured that I could get the bottle in and out on the go, and be able to not slow down to have to get my fluids. And so jump forward a couple of years, I was off in college. I was a competitive cross-country skier, competitive runner. My major, I'd switched it multiple times from mathematics to geology.
Where'd you all go to school?
I was, at the time, I was at the University of Colorado in Boulder.
Okay.
And
I won't hold that against you.
I know. And so I was competing, and I was skiing, and then I actually transferred to BYU and Provo after that. And I switched my major to pre-med. And it was while I was skiing on the ski team that I realized that, hey, I could make something that would help me for skiing and running. And I was, at the time, I was getting a little bit of money from my parents every month. And I was like annoyed by that. It's like, no, I want to be totally independent. And so I says, well, college kids start businesses all the time. Why don't I start a business? And I thought, well, that will help me put me through college. It's kind of a long road to go through and become a doctor. So I better figure out how to make some money on the side. And so I went home, I typed up a one-page business plan. And I typed it it said, okay, I'm going to start a business, and I want to make ski bags, cosmetic bags, duffel bags, and then I went down the line, and right at the bottom of the line was, I want to make running backpacks or running packs. And I gave it to my dad, and I says, Dad, I want to borrow $1,000 from you. I don't have any money. I'm a poor college student. Will you loan me $1,000? What did your dad do as a profession? My dad was a lawyer, and he ended up practicing for 60 years. So he was just kind of a country lawyer that did everything. So. Okay. So he was a general lawyer, which is kind of rare these days. Yes. Okay. Right. Very general lawyer. He probably did pretty well, because it sounds like you grew up in a Mormon family. Yes, exactly. Right. So everybody in his ward and everybody else's ward probably used him to take care of the legal stuff, right? Right. He was just kind of, he would help everybody that walked in the door, he would help them. So, yeah. So anyway, I gave this plan to him and I was kind of afraid to give it to him, but he was such a supportive dad. And he looked at it and he says, all right. And he wrote out a check for $1,000 and he gave it to me. And I drove to Salt Lake City. I grew up in Rexburg, drove to Salt Lake City, bought
Rexburg, Idaho.
Idaho. Yes, correct. Rexburg, Idaho.
Yeah.
I drove to Salt Lake City and bought a sewing machine, a Dane sewing machine in Salt Lake City. I spent $960 on a sewing machine.
Ooh.
And that gave me $40 left over for raw materials. So I bought the sewing machine, moved it into a studio apartment. And at that point, I started making backpacks. So I made I set up a booth, sold a few things at the ski swap. And then at the time I was working at a running shoe store also to try to support myself through college. And I put some samples of running backpacks up on the wall. And a guy came in and he said, he was a sales rep for Asics Tiger. And he said, wow, those are really cool. Where'd you get those? And I says, well, I made them. And he says, you did? And I says, yeah, in my apartment. And he says, do you need a sales rep? And I says, what's a sales rep? And he says, well, it's somebody that will go around and help get you orders. And I said, sure. And so I took the packs off the wall and gave them to him and he walked away. And that's how I got started. My first company was called Ultimate Direction.
Right. Yep.
And
it's still around.
And it's
Right?
Still around. Yeah. And they're one of my bigger competitors now. And we have a friendly relationship with them and they do a great job. And I still have a lot of love for that brand as well too. But anyway,
I still have somebody. I remember Mike Morton when he was running competitively when he made his comeback in 2012, 2013. He was like surprised because I had some of the original Ultimate Direction handhelds.
Right. Oh, cool.
I still use those.
Well, and they still work.
They still work fine.
Yeah.
And I'm used to the old school top where you bite it, pull it, and then you slam the other one on top to close it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So that's kind of how we got started. It kind of evolved from that. I went from my apartment to a little office, had 4 or 5 sewing machines, hired a few people to sew for me, then had a factory in Rexburg for many years, then had another factory in South Dakota. And really, all along the way, our premise behind the company was trying to make athletes more efficient when they're trying to compete at a high level, and particularly trail runners and ultra runners. And my specialty was mountain running. And
this was what time frame was this? The mid 80s?
Yes, 1985 is when Ultimate Direction started. And so at the time, there was no Camelback, there was no anybody else. People were still using fanny packs and stuff, and they were getting by. It's funny,
because that was when Western States was getting some traction, and Wasatch had started.
Yes.
A lot of the big old hundreds had gotten going.
Right. They had gotten going. And so people were still trying to figure out, how do we carry stuff? Aid stations were a little farther apart back then too. So carrying things was pretty important. Bruce
said he would carry one little quart lab bottle. I don't know if you know what that is.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. With a little squirter thing, and he would have a couple pieces of hard candy and maybe a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and like a little fanny pack. And he'd go out on the Western States Trail all day on that.
Right.
So he said, like in my sphere, he was like fat adapting by default just because
he didn't carry anything. Yeah.
You couldn't carry anything. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of how I got started. Ultimate Direction was a great brand. I sold it in 2002. And then I worked for Nathan for about 7 years.
So you were consulting for Nathan, or
I did all their design work for about 7 years. Yeah.
Okay. See.
So really, Nathan and Ultimate Direction are my 2 biggest competitors now. Yep. Solomon's also there as well too, but I kind of started my own competitors.
Okay. Yeah. So you did work for Nathan, and then when did you start Ultimate Direction?
Ultimate Direction was 1985. Nathan was, I started working for Nathan about 2003, and then UltrAspire started in 2013.
Okay. And then I guess through the Were you manufacturing offshore in Ultimate Direction when you sold it, or had you started
Yes.
that process?
Yes. So, and that was really what caused me to, I was really stubborn. I loved manufacturing. I loved USA manufacturing. All of my competitors at the time had gone offshore with their manufacturing, and we were having a difficult time because our labor kept going up. We were having a difficult time competing with offshore manufacturers. There was a time in Ultimate Direction years that the sport, our ultra running sport, had grown so much that we were having a hard time. We had like 100 employees in Rexburg and 100 employees in South Dakota, and we couldn't keep up with manufacturing. And we actually put like a 2-year moratorium on opening up new dealerships. And because of that, it kind of spurred on a lot of competition, but all of our competition.
You had trouble scaling because of
Cash
the
flow
costs
issues.
involved. Yeah.
Yeah, costs involved. Exactly.
So that really kind of forced you to go offshore in terms of your manufacturing.
Yes. And so we still had our factory in Rexburg when Ultimate Direction was purchased. And
I'll bet that immediately left.
it took about 2 years.
Yeah, that's about right. Transition. Yeah.
Yeah, the transition. And that was probably one of the hardest days of my life when I had to walk into the factory. People had worked for me for 15, 20 years. And they had been stalwart, they had been hard workers, and to have to let them know that, we were going to shut down the factory. It was really a sad day.
Oh, yeah, no, I get that, but this is part of what this conversation is actually all about.
Right.
Right. So you worked for
Exactly.
Nathan. Of course, Nathan was doing offshore, and then you started UltrAspire, and that's about the time I met you, was right. And you said you were doing your stuff in Vietnam, I think, at the time.
Early on, we did it in our first transition was into the Philippines. Okay. And we had really, really good production capacity in the Philippines and really good factories that we worked with. They were phenomenal factories. What we found, though, is just like everybody, the labor costs, and it's a good thing for the Philippines, but their middle class was growing very quickly. And so because of that, labor costs were going up. And so we transitioned to Vietnam, and we've been in Vietnam now for quite a few years.
And you're real happy in I've seen this quality of sewn goods, because a number of manufacturers of outdoor gear are doing their manufacturing in Vietnam, and the quality is really good.
Yes, and in fact, there's a lot of clothing there now. A lot of bigger brands are being produced there. A lot of shoe brands are produced there as well now, and so their quality has really been good.
But in terms of like technical sewing, not just clothing is. I'm not trying to knock clothing, but technical sewing, I've been quite impressed, because years ago I did some manufacturing in China. Of inflatable whitewater boats, and it was a interesting learning curve, but I had to dive in there because, as you probably know, but with dealing with the Asians, and I'm half Asian, so I can talk I can talk to smack, but if you didn't keep a tight rein on them, boy, things would start to slip real quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I know you spend time going there to work on the factory floor to make sure things are done exactly as you design and spec them, and I don't know how much you're doing that now, but I remember when we met, that was one of the things where you were back and forth. So tell us about
it's really interesting, because it's kind of come full circle, my whole innovation process. In the early days, I did everything. I sat down, I created in my head, I made paper patterns, I cut them out, I sewed them together, then I had a couple people help me sew. Then when we transitioned to overseas, I became much more adept at drawing and creating the concepts. I would send the drawings over to the factories. The factories would build a prototype for me, and then they would send the prototype back to me for testing. And one thing that our companies have always done is we've always used, real athletes for testing, and we do a ton of testing and a ton of prototyping to make sure that the stuff really works. But so like
Jeff Browning, we'll talk about Jeff, because he's
exactly
he's what I call an early adopter, right?
Absolutely, early adopter for sure.
So shout out to Jeff. Yeah, but anyway,
so then COVID hit, And, I'd been going to the factory. In fact, to set up a new factory, I would go 4 or 5. In fact, one year I went 9 times to Vietnam to try to train them on the process procedures, to get the designs finished, to teach them everything that they needed to learn to produce the products. And so it was a lot of work.
Totally get that, because when we had problems with our production, I had to literally send a 40-foot container of inflatable river whitewater boats back to China, fly back there, open up those boats, inflate them, and then slice them open to show them why they were defective. And it was ugly. And then I had to do like what you were doing. I had to spec everything myself, stitch count, stitch pattern, type of material, and not give them any leeway. And it's like, and I went and worked on the factory floor. And they thought it was kind of funny, because the hotel where I would stay was like 20 miles away, and I'd run there on occasion.
Oh, interesting.
And wow, that was really something, because this guy with no shirt on was running through China.
Oh, that's crazy.
Very cool. But it was good. It was good because it made a good impression on him. Like this guy's not just some guy to come yell at us.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. That's very cool.
But I get what you're saying.
Back to COVID. So when I couldn't travel anymore, and I totally changed my style of work. And I've always had sewing machines. I've always done prototyping, but mostly modifications of samples. And I totally switched my style, knowing that innovation had to continue on. And the way that we were going to remain competitive in the marketplace was if we could keep pushing full steam ahead innovation. And the only way we could do that, because the style of work was to show up at the sample room and show up at the factory and work with the factory workers to get stuff developed. That could no longer happen. So this is about the time that I brought in Kevin. Kevin's doing a phenomenal job. And I switched to where now I have 12 sewing machines in my office. I have one of every style that we have in the factory. And I do all my pattern work. And then I sew the samples together.
You make the prototype.
I physically make the prototype.
That's
So Jeff Browning, you talked about him. He has a couple of signature styles that he came out with. The first one that we came out with was called the Bronco Race Vest, and I'll use this to illustrate the point. He came to me and says, "I want a vest that does A, B, C, D," and I have this certain race, and I'm like, okay. And he says, "I have the Zion 100 coming up in about a month. Do you think you can build me a sample?" I says, "Absolutely." So like 2 weeks later, I built him a sample, sent it to him. He gave me comments, and another couple days later, I made him another sample, sent it to him. He came, ran Zion 100, won the race in a prototype that was sewn together in St. George, Utah. And so what that's done is it's made my work style, which I love it because I'm so hands-on. It made my work style that my connection to the athletes is much closer, because we're actually building samples directly with them. I'm taking those samples, letting them test them. I make all the patterns. I build a perfect sample with labels, everything that's photographable. I make sure that it works right for the athlete. And then I take that sample and I send it to the factory, and then I email them the patterns. And then I says, okay, now make salesman samples. And so because of that, my time spent in the factories has diminished to zero. My plan now is just for relationship standpoint to go 1 time per year, just to make sure, that they're following procedures and stuff like that. But it's really been a blessing, because, you look at something like COVID and for me, we had to evolve, and I had to change, and I had to change my style. But in the long run, it's been a really good blessing. It's been good for my health. It's been good for the athletes. It's been good for the company.
Well, and this is part of what innovation does is innovation is about problem solving. It's about curiosity and problem solving. And that's the thing. True innovators are actually better posed to deal with things like COVID hitting.
Right.
I'm not trying to say that just because we know how to adapt. We go in and try to problem solve. We don't talk about it, or it's like, okay, what do we got here? How do we deal with this? And to a point, when COVID hit, I brought in a guy I found online after years of just going through people who gave me a lot of lip service. And I don't think they didn't mean well. It's just that I I'm good at what I do in terms of
Right.
figuring out the metabolic stuff. I suck at everything else. I mean, I
We
don't,
all have our specialties.
right. We all have our magic, but like people who are innovators, innovation is about that curiosity. And then you go down those rabbit holes and you're blind to all the other things that have to happen in a company.
Right. Right.
But innovation is what makes your company, what makes my company,
Right.
because we're out there in front, but a lot of times people don't understand what we're doing. And then a lot of times our personalities aren't as, it's not that they're bad personalities, they just don't jive with the business way of doing things, right?
You're right. Yeah.
And so what happened with us with COVID hitting was we finally had started getting some traction with the guy I brought in to help me with marketing, John Dionisiou, who lives in Cyprus. He's
Right.
and he happened to be in Cyprus when COVID hit. But January, February, we had like the best months, some of the best months ever. And those are usually that low sales months for us.
Right.
Of 2020. And then all of a sudden it hit, and then bam, everything went. And just like you, I'm like, we're going to use this to retool and move forward. And that's, I've gone into debt and done all that but it's like, damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead. And it's actually put us in a better position, just like what you probably did, is put you in a better position because, the business people, it's like they're looking at the books and it's like, let's slash cost.
Right. Exactly.
Like, and you're looking at it as, okay, we got to adapt and we got to poise ourselves for this. And this is kind of part of that whole thing about how innovation is key to real problem solving.
Right. And then you have a vision, and you're being an innovator, you feel so strongly about the vision. You're able to push it forward through those.
You can't do anything else. There's a guy named Bruce Carlton who talks about this, that creative genius, they can't help themselves. It's not about the money. I mean, we need to make money to survive, but it's like, it's not about this. Like, that's all you can do. It's like,
right.
I mean, I know you probably feel that way about what you're doing. It's like, you eat, sleep, and breathe. Okay, what's the next iteration of what I'm going to do here, and how can I do this better?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it's like everything was lined out for me. But when I was in college, I had no idea that this was going to be my path. It's like, okay, I've spent X amount of years, building packs for athletes, and it's just like, that's all I've done. And that's all I know.
If somebody had told you 5 years before you went to med school that you'd be doing this, you would have told them they were crazy.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Same thing for me. What set me on the path was bonking at my first marathon. I mean,
there you go.
I turned 40 and I was thinking, okay, I'm at the halfway point. How do I spend it? So I started running and getting in shape, and my first marathon, I bonked. And I'm like, this carb loading stuff this is baloney. And
right.
I had the biology degree, just like your mom and grandmother taught you. So I had the biology degree from Davis. I got hammered by all the pre-med and pre-vet students, but I still had the understanding. And it's like, okay, well, this didn't work. So what does work?
Right.
And then I started, thinking and evolving and doing it with myself. And then in 2003 and 4 and 5, I started doing it with a couple friends, Simon Michui and my friend Ling Ru, and got them on board. And then their friends got on board. And then I got into Western States and ran Western States. And that's when I came across Vespa a month out, and somebody threw me some pouches of Vespa and said, hey, try this. My friend Mojo swears by it. And I looked on the back of the pouch and it said, oh, this is about fat burning. Well, because I've already been open to that, it didn't seem heretical, because at that time, fat burning was considered a joke. Right. Just like what you were doing. I'm sure most people, unless they were runners and they needed something like that, most people they were like, what are you doing, Bryce? Right.
Well, and just a side example, you look at the running shoes. When I was first running the Grand Teton, the shoes I ran in an old Brooks Vantage. At the time, people were still using mountaineering boots. And for me to be in shorty shorts and a cotton t-shirt and a pair of Brooks running shoes running to the top of the Grand Teton, people thought I was insane, and that was before, and now everybody wears running shoes everywhere, and it's
I know. It's just crazy because you see that. Yeah. Cause that's all I wear is a singlet and a pair of shorts and some some ultra
Jeez.
lone peaks or temps, and I'm good.
Yeah,
for the
you're
day.
good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I need a shell, I'll bring it, an extra layer, I'll tie it around my waist, and away you go. So, but that's kind of where innovation is. So here you are now. I think one of the other things that's key to point out here is, real innovation isn't about the status. It's like, you like to get your hands dirty. You like to read and noodle and look at things and do technology transfers. Like, like the whole magnet thing is really
Right,
cool.
right,
Technology.
right.
I mean, it's just, this is part of that whole thing. And like what you were saying about this obsession, like, I think the place that an innovator has to be is, part of it has to be spent on that front line, in the interfacing and applying that knowledge in the real world, and then problem
Right.
solving. Because people love to talk about stuff nowadays, and you see this online all the time, but and this is a problem, that I see this, particularly living here in the left coast. Like an example I put out, and I don't want to get too political here, but like, we've got laws now that they're going to phase out internal combustion automobiles in 10
Right.
years.
Right.
Right. And I'm not against EVs per se, but it's like, we don't have the generation capacity to meet the electrical generation needs now,
Right.
the base load stuff. And they don't have those basic solutions haven't been addressed. And it's like, there's a lot of people who mean well and want to help the environment, but they're not getting their hands dirty. I guess that's my point. You got to get your hands dirty, and you got to break things to get to do that innovation that's going to solve that larger problem. Because California, we're in an energy crisis right now. In the summer, we can't charge cars, we can't run our air conditioning at peak load.
Right.
Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant is supposed to shut down in 2025. They're trying to extend it. The largest coal-fired plant in the country is out in Delta, Utah, and it's owned by LA Power. So
Wow.
20% of LA, 20 to 30% of LA's power, depending on the time of day, comes from Delta, Utah.
Wow. Interesting.
On coal.
Yeah.
And people don't know this stuff. And this is
Right.
why, like,
Right.
so you have to, I get the point again I'm trying to make is, what you're doing is like, you're hands-on with this, as well as having the vision. Everybody can have vision, right?
Right.
It's just like this thing I have with the shoot 'em up games online, right?
Right.
Call of Duty, foreplay, I guess. I'm not gonna,
Right.
all these shoot 'em up games, it's like, it seems really cool online and all that, but I mean, when you go in, if you actually have to go into battle and get shot at, even if it's in a paintball thing, it doesn't, it's a very different environment.
Right. And I think that whole idea of getting dirty, I think that it's almost a generational thing. And just to illustrate another point, over the years, I've had a few designers that have worked for me and helped me out with stuff like that. And there some of them have been really good. But the thing that I struggle with is, they don't have the patience, and they don't have the desire to get down to the nitty gritty. And they'll do a beautiful drawing of something and say, let's make a pack like this. And I'll say, okay, that's really cool. And then I'll say, how are you going to make it? And they have no clue. They have no clue how they're going to make the patterns, how they're going to cut it out, where the seam lines are going to be, what materials they're going to use, how they're going to construct it. They don't understand.
And here's the problem.
Yes.
Because we've had this generational shift, once you move beyond that pretty design that you can put up on the web and show everybody how beautiful it is and how functional it is, you move to those details. That's where we lose people.
Yeah.
I lose people all the time, because I start going into this is why your physiology and metabolism is doing this.
Right.
And, okay, we have to address this, and this, because it's all these different elements coming together, right? Same as when you're designing stuff, and nobody wants to discuss that stuff.
Well, and they don't want to discuss it, but then at a bigger corporate level, one of the reasons I left Nathan, and I had a great tenure at Nathan and started my own thing again, is because they get to the point where they start cutting to the point because they want to get rid of all those little details. They
And
want
they
to
don't
get
understand the importance of it.
they don't understand the importance of it. And
Yes.
so that's where you get frustrated. And then it's like, okay, I want to make sure that the people that I work with know that we're paying attention to all those little details. And so,
Well, and this is to a point, this is what made, like, I'm a pilot. My dad was an airline pilot and a Marine fighter pilot.
I'm a pilot too.
Okay. Yeah, cool. All right. So like, I'll pick on Boeing and because Boeing has jumped the shark.
Right.
And my dad was talking about this back when he was alive, when they designed the 777. That was the first airplane that Boeing designed that they started to cut corners on. But it was that dedication to build engineering the best airplane ever that got Boeing where they are. And then all of a sudden it became very corporate and very shareholder return.
Right.
And you can see this trajectory where Douglas Aircraft competed with Boeing. So they both companies made the best airplanes in the world in terms of serviceability, durability, role of purpose. They just were airplanes that airlines could rely on that didn't cost too much to operate, were functional, sturdy, blah, blah, blah. But when McDonnell Corp and Douglas Aircraft merged, that's when the cost, because McDonnell Corp was a defense contractor and they were just really good at doing the corporate welfare trough thing, right?
Right.
So it became a lot more business driven than engineering driven. And that's when the DC-9, the DC-10 came out. And those things, they had problems because they tried to cut corners and it bit them, right?
Right.
And then when Boeing Boeing was already on the path, but when they merged with bought McDonnell Douglas, that's when it really went super corporate.
Right.
And you can see that right now in their product line. And nobody's really, the 737 MAX, they did away with the 747. And I think that was, that airplane was, has a safety record. And what happened to me is like, okay, both Boeing and the airlines killed it because it was cost cutting versus safety.
Right.
I mean, when you're going over the Pacific, I'm sorry, I don't want to be flying on two engines.
Right.
Especially those big diameter ones, because you're a design guy. The physics of that stuff is like when one of those engines comes apart, it's not pretty because they're so big.
Right.
And so I'm like, I want to be in a 747, but not to get off the point, but then, all their products now, they're having a lot of trouble with them. The 787's been fraught with problems. The 777's been fraught with problems. The 737 MAX has been a disaster, right?
Right.
And it's all because the innovation is gone.
Right.
And I was looking at something the other day, and this is like, Boeing's not looking to internally design. They were trying to partner with Embraer because Embraer had a bunch of engineers that were doing some pretty interesting thing in the regional jet design thing. It's like, and I'm sure that was part of what you faced at Nathan.
Right. I think exactly. And I think what happens is people just, when they start cutting budgets, they cut budgets out of the R&D side of things.
That's right.
Yeah, they would rather just either buy the technology from somebody else or borrow it or steal it from somebody else, whatever. And then they'll put a different logo on it and change the shape a little bit. And that's the way.
And they'll start cutting out those details that matter, but they don't think it's matter. And just to a point, like you said, you're having to struggle to convince Nathan's people to do things a certain way. Well, look at the 737 MAX. They didn't have the redundancy. They cut out a few little things and made them options that created the environment for those crashes that in the 737 MAX. I mean, just little things like this that details matter, but it doesn't matter to I don't want to pick on bean counters, but the businessmen don't think it matters. And you see this a lot in a lot of different food products where they start substituting in cheaper oils, cheaper ingredients and not thinking fillers. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like they substituted they thought they were doing a good thing when they substituted vegetable oils in the fryers. And, like I remember talking to a client who was in the fast food industry as a vendor to the fast food industry.
Right.
And we were talking about this, and I was telling him all of this about the fast food fryers. Now they've substituted vegetable oil for lard and tallow. And he said, oh, wait a second. My food scientists were telling me this was going to be a problem.
Right.
This was way back in the 70s,
Wow.
when they started doing it. And so, and innovators, to a point, they just, no, we got to do it this way.
Mm-hmm. And that's a struggle, because you really have to have both. You've got to have the business side of things, and you have to have the innovation side of things too.
Absolutely. You have to find that balance, but it's like we've kind of come off balance where it's all about maximizing shareholder return. And this is something, like I was talking to somebody about this. I mean, just a brief history of this, but it started when President Nixon, how old are you, Bryce?
I am 60.
Okay, you're a little younger than me, but only by a few years. But
okay.
So this started when Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard. And that wasn't really the start, but that was what set things in motion with Wall Street. Because by taking it off the gold standard, then you had the Fed having to do stuff with money supply, because it wasn't tied to gold standard. But what happened once Nixon took it off the gold standard was then Wall Street had ability to play games. And of course they started to lobby. And then you had the rise in the 80s of Carl Icahn and T. Boone Pickens, who championed the whole idea of maximizing shareholder return. These corporate raiders fundamentally transformed how Wall Street works. Instead of serving companies at that level, whether it's a small business, like they were looking at how they could extract as much money out of it rather than develop as much value.
Right.
And so that like a lot of big companies, like when I was working in Central America developing spray and GPS guidance technology for the banana companies, that was just in the wake of when those companies, Dole, Castle and Cook, Chiquita Brands, they were taken over by private equity and Wall Street type people, and they had these huge R&D budgets, right, to study bananas, disease prevention. They had hospitals for their working staff. They had all kinds of stuff invested in running a stable company, and that all got gutted.
Right.
So it's not just Boeing. You see this across sectors. I mean, you're seeing like a lot of people don't realize, like the pharmaceutical industry, and we won't even talk about the current situation, but a lot of what the pharmaceutical companies done in the last 20 years is they just reformulate, they just tweak a chemical formula, repatent it, and that's how they're doing things.
Right. Well, and it really coming back into my industry, which I would consider it, a low tech industry compared to other things, but that's the same thing that happens. We struggle with people that will just take one of our packs,
reverse engineering,
pattern piece by pattern piece. They'll copy it. They'll take our logo off, put their logo on it, and they'll put it on Amazon, and they'll ship directly from China to US customers a copy. And that's hard, especially when it's all subsidized.
Well, and it's what I call a feeding frenzy to the bottom.
Right. Yes, that's a really good way to put it.
Yes, because you're competing against somebody that's doesn't have the cost internalizer, so it's just driving the whole thing down and putting even more pressure to not do the investment in innovation.
Right.
Because, like you say, it's easier to copy or buy or acquire than to innovate. Because look at your journey. I mean, we haven't even talked about the mistakes and missteps and the extra time.
I know.
And all the time you probably spent thinking about this and noodling with it and playing with it. I mean, can you share some commentary about that? Because I mean, for the first handhelds and stuff like that, I mean, Tell me
Well,
about that.
any of the products that we develop, some of them just click really quickly, it's like, it's an aha moment. But generally, I think on average, it takes about 10 times the amount of time to think about something and to noodle on it than to actually sit down and do it.
So to get to that aha moment, even when you have an aha moment, there's a lot of random stuff coming together, coalescing.
Right. Well, and what I tell my athletes, when I work with them, because I have a one-on-one relationship with many of them, and I just say, you don't have to come up with a solution. I just want to know the problem. What are you struggling with? What do we need to solve? What problem do we need to solve? What event are you doing? What do you need to carry? What is your struggle with it? And then I put that in my brain, and my brain goes 24/7. Every waking hour, my brain is running and operating. And I remember all the comments from all the athletes. And sometimes it takes me a year of just letting it just kind of spin around in my brain. Okay, so-and-so, Jeff Browning's having a problem with this. I need to do this. Or Magda's having a problem.
Some random thing comes in, and all of a sudden,
exactly.
Bingo.
All of a sudden the light bulb goes off.
Yeah.
And then bam, 2 days later it's done. But it has to be that, I call it the incubation period. And the incubation period is unpredictable. You have no idea how long it's going to take.
Well, and this is the thing. Here's a concept I want to put out to you. I thought about a lot. Okay. We as humans, because of our human conscious brain, we want to control things.
Right.
And especially business people want to control things.
Right.
And they use metrics, but nature doesn't work that way.
Right.
Think of natural systems, biological systems. I see this all the time with people in nutrition and training. They're trying to engineer biology.
Right.
And like that thought process is part of our natural thing. And it's natural systems thrive on chaos, but out of that chaos and entropy comes an order.
Right.
Right. And it's
right.
like
exactly.
It's like I say, and people don't, that's a big thing that scares people, because it's like, instead of getting curious, like, oh, this is interesting, I don't know anything about it, and being willing to admit, hey, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn and get curious about this.
Right. And pursue it.
Yeah. And pursue it doggedly, because like a perfect example of that chaos is like how each of us came into this earth. I mean, when you think about the tens of thousands of eggs that your mother had and the billions of sperm your dad had, and how that union of that particular egg, that particular sperm, just that simple act of conception, it's like, there's no way we're going to figure that out. There's no algorithm for that.
No, there's no way. Yeah.
There's no way. Right. And that, innovation is sort of like that. And it's like, you see me all lit up. I see you all lit up about this. It's just, but that's what drives us, is like having curiosity over fear and control. And then just knowing it's like, it's going to happen.
Right.
Exactly. As you accumulate more knowledge and not get fixed in that knowledge and stay open to new things coming in, it's just this continually evolving thing.
Right. And one of my biggest pet peeves in business has always been when somebody comes to me and tells me it can't be done. And I was like, it can be done. We just have to figure out how to do it, So.
Yeah. You can't do it.
Yeah.
But that's a challenge for me. It's like,
exactly.
First question is, why can't it be done?
Right.
It's like same thing with me. When I started this thing, it's like I said, I bonked at my first marathon because I carb loaded.
Right.
I'm like, this doesn't work. So I ate protein, fat, and a little bit of carbs, and ran 3 more marathons, had no trouble. I'm like, it's fat. And people they told me this, you can't do it. And then now, I have data with Peter and Jeff that nobody has. And it's like,
exactly.
It's like, and that's data like in 2000 and up until 2015, the ceiling for fat oxidation was considered 1 gram a minute, and most people burn below a half. Well, I get it. Okay, you need carbs if you're only going to burn less than half a gram a minute of fat, but when you see, I've got data on Jeff and Peter where they're sustaining for like 10, 15 minutes over 2 grams a minute.
Wow.
Okay.
That's cool.
Start doing the math on that. And but like you said, people told me it couldn't be done. Right.
Well, and that whole conversation with the fat adaptive stuff is so fascinating to me, just
Oh,
because.
you're gonna love it because
Yeah.
it's just like what you're doing. There's so many facets to it. It's not just shotgunning a bunch of carbs,
Right.
right? It's like fat metabolism is got all these different avenues, and it's very complex, very dynamic, and all these cool things. But like, it's the same thing with what you're doing. I mean, there's all these things you're pulling together to design packs, handhelds, waist lights. I mean, what's your line consist of these days?
Yeah, it's waist packs, running vests and lights, and then
Hydration
accessories.
packs.
Yeah, hydration packs that go along with it. And lights is another prime example of, once I got over the age of 40 and I love trail running and I still wanted to get out and run, but with having kids and hard work schedule, a lot of times I was running at night. And what I found is that running with a regular headlamp, I realized that I couldn't move as fast and couldn't see as well with the regular headlamp because it created tunnel vision, but it also made everything look flat. And so that's when the light bulb went off. It's like, I also have done photography in my life, and I realized that in order to shoot a beautiful photograph, you want depth of field. And the way you get depth of field is you never put your flash on top of the camera. You put your flash somewhere else so that it creates depth out of the person's face so that you can see the details. And I thought, well, that makes sense for lights too. So if you put the waist light on if you put a light on your waist, it's going to cast shadows across all the details, all the rocks, the twigs.
Right, because
and then suddenly waist lights are created. And waist lights are created. And now I can run full bore ahead, just like I'm running in daylight with a waist light.
Right. And I get what you're saying about the depth perception, because
yeah,
have you ever flown low over water?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really interesting.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. You lose all that depth perception. You better be paying real close attention, because you take your attention off for a second.
Right.
If you're low, you could be in the drink.
You could be in a heap of trouble for sure. So anyway, that's really how innovation. I think another thing that I've been thinking about too is, and I can't understand why, it's almost a generational thing. And there's obviously exceptions to this, but I don't feel a lot of the younger generation has the patience. They want things too quick. They're not willing to put the effort in.
It's the convenience of modern life. Yeah.
Convenience of modern life, and I think that the innovation process, I think it is a process that requires so much incubation time, so much think time, so much dwelling upon it, so many sleepless nights, so many things that you have to do to get from point A to point B, that a lot of the younger generation, not all of them, but a lot of the younger generation is not willing to go through that cycle. So that's where they get into the rip off and duplicate, because they want to cut corners.
Right. And the more you do that, I mean, and that's just human nature, right? You want to take the most
easy
convenient,
way.
fast. Right. And the thing is a lot of my work is based on evolutionary biology.
Right.
And I always like to step back, because that's my, that science, real science, not everybody says the science, but when you think about science in the way I think you should think about it, when you think about it and see it, everything makes sense in terms of human behavior, physiology, metabolism, when you look at it through the lens of the environment and pressures that shaped us as humans for, say, millennium before agriculture.
Right.
Okay. And so, in those times when we were hunter-gatherers, that opportunity for convenience and to do things more efficiently made sense, because life was hard. Right. There was a lot of work involved. Like I tell people, the reason we have hunger triggers and the reason we like carbs and sweets is because that's the way, in the environment we were in. Just the simple hunger trigger was what got us off our butts to go hunt and gather, because without that drive, we wouldn't get out of it. Because you look at today, you got people getting DoorDash and food delivered to their homes. They don't get out of their car at the drive-in. I mean, that's how lazy we are.
Right. Become very lazy. Yeah.
And that's convenience. And but because it's like I say, it's the environment, stupid.
Right.
right? We've changed that environment, but our hardwiring has not adapted to that new environment.
Right.
So
And I
yeah,
think that that's your whole point with innovation, that kind of innovation has followed suit with that.
the death of innovation, because it is hard, it is problem solving, and nobody wants to deal with problems anymore.
Right.
And it's like you say, to me, it's like, okay, this is an opportunity to learn. And I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say that in life. And but
Yeah. And hopefully we learn from them, right?
right. And there's a few I didn't learn, and I had to repeat them. And
Yeah.
you
Been there,
know,
done that.
it's like, oh, okay. And eventually you kind of get that down, and you go on and find other challenges. And one of the things I love about the ultra running community is it's like you can go, you got the support to go out and do that. It's okay.
Right.
Not like a lot of other sports where failure is kind of looked upon as something like, okay, you did your best, but you didn't win, or you didn't come in your age group, or you didn't meet the cutoff. Like in Ironman, I mean, it's very like Ironman sports, or like even team sports. It's like, with ultra running, at least the community is there. That's really
Right.
good. And it's like at Western States, I go out with Tim Tweetmeyer every year to bring in help the guys and gals who are on the bubble
Uh-huh.
get in before the 30-hour mark.
Right.
And that's so rewarding, because that's that golden hour is like,
Right.
right. And so that's when it really gets really cool to see that.
Right.
Yeah. And so
Yeah, a lot of changes happened to those people during that time. It's just to get them through that last stage is a pretty cool thing to go through with them.
Yeah. And I've been able to help people finish every year. Some of them make the cutoff, some of them don't, but they all finish.
Right. That's cool.
Right. And like the gal I did, she missed it by a couple of minutes, but she brought the house down.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's cool.
So, it's great to see. And like the year before, I paced another gal, and she was dead last, she was the dead last person that could have made it.
Right.
So I got her cooled off, got her some water and salt, got her a Vespa Ultra concentrate. She took off running past three people.
Wow.
And finished. So, it's cool. But
That's
back to
really
the innovation thing, I think,
yes.
When you look at innovators, and I think you can relate to them, when you look at people like Thomas Edison, Nikolai Tesla, Walt Disney,
Right.
Hewlett and Packard, they're all just, they were in their garage or their shop, the Wright brothers, just tinkering around and noodling. Right. When you think about like Einstein credits a lot of his work, that aha moment where it all came together.
Right.
He said a lot of that really happened in his early years when he was a patent clerk filing patents in office, and he'd see all these ideas, right, that were being filed for patents. Right. Just sit look outside the window and,
just start daydreaming.
Be daydreaming. That's exactly what he was doing. Yeah. There was no organized set goal to it. And but years later, it all coalesced. Right.
Yeah. So that was his incubation period then.
Right. So, you've got the patience, you got the convenience, you got the fact that people don't like to struggle. Right. They don't want, and they want certainty. But then in today's do all be all world, I think part of it also is that it's not okay. It's really kind of looked down upon to just daydream and just kind of be off in the clouds and have that, because that incubation period for you is people don't know what you're doing and thinking. They can't understand it.
No, and from the outside world, people would think you look lazy, but they don't realize that your brain is going 24/7. It's always working on something.
Yeah, and even when you're asleep, you might be in a deep sleep, but your brain's sorting
still working. Yeah, exactly.
One of the things I remember in meeting you at the running event years ago was, it seems like your wife gets you. I think that's a wonderful thing. You need that. Yes. Yeah. And she does. And sometimes I'll say to her, sorry, my brain's a little occupied right now. And it looks like I'm staring at the wall, but I'm really working on something, and she just says, I know, you just keep doing what you're doing, and it's just like, okay, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. But you look at, like Thomas Edison, I think one of the things he said about the light bulb was when people asked him, he says, yeah, I just ran out of ways to fail,
Yeah. Right.
you know?
Right. Yeah.
So what do you, where do you plan to take the company now that you're working? Because it sounds like you really got the company where you want it, which is kind of
Right.
where I want to go. I'm not there yet. I'm having to wear too many hats, but
Right.
it sounds like where are you guys looking to take the company now, and that you can tell me about. That's not like top
Yeah,
secret.
yeah. And not just big picture stuff with the company. Our plans is we've got a great executive team in our accounting with Kevin, with Joe in our marketing department. We've got a great executive team, and they're all in place. And my plans are, I honestly, I don't want to retire. I love what
Amen. Like I say, I don't
I
ever
love
want
it.
to retire.
I love what I do.
Right. But I don't want to be
Yeah.
chasing it like I am now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And you went through those chasing it years when you were building your company and going to Vietnam probably 6 times a year, 6 or 7
Right.
times. That's chasing it.
Right. Yeah. I want to I want to continue to grow the company, want to get to the point where I just work on innovation, work on creation, spend time outside, spend time with the family. I love the people I work with, spend time with them as well too, and continue to grow. We've had people offer to buy us over the years, and we've resisted all of those. And for me, I would love the company to be an employee-owned company and just let them take it over and let me keep innovating until I can't innovate anymore. And then hopefully my real dream, and I've been searching for it, but I've been struggling to find it, is trying to find somebody that could come in as like an apprentice to me and kind of learn the ropes and understand the ropes and kind of have that patience and that passion and that drive to innovate. And I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's possible to find somebody like that, but that would be my dream, would be to find somebody that could come in and kind of work with me and learn and grow and kind of learn the ropes and understand construction and techniques and so forth, so they can take on that vision for the future.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, because this last year I created another company to bifurcate the products from the services and the content. And I set that company up as a C Corp, but under a special provision in California called a social purpose corp. And it was set up specifically so that shareholder return, maximizing shareholder return, was not the sole driver of the company. And that's what you're saying is like, I'm on the path to making that that's going to be an ESOP,
Right.
a full ESOP. If you want to do that with your company, there's a guy named Mike Moyer, and it's called Slicing Pie. If you just do a Google look up Mike Moyer Slicing Pie, he's got a whole formula on how to do that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. And ultimately, where I get my joy, is I get my joy outside with my wife, doing things. I love rock climbing, love running. And that's where a lot of my innovation comes, is when I'm free.
I do my best thinking on the trail.
Exactly. And then I have 8 grandkids now. I want to spend time with the grandkids. And yeah, and it's amazing, and they're fun to be around. And then I want to just continue to work with.
And you're in shape. You're in shape where you can be doing stuff with them.
Absolutely. Right? I'm training. I can't tell you what it is right now, but I'm training for an FKT right now. And so I'm more fit than I've been in probably 10 years, and I'm really happy about it.
Did we send you some Vespa? I think we did.
You did. Yeah. And I need to get some more from you for sure, because I'm totally committed to the fat adaptive stuff. So I need to get some more from you.
We need to do a call and get you sorted out on the stuff you need so you can do this. 'Cause I mean, Jeff's on it, and you look at Jeff at 51, top of the sport.
I know exactly. And the reality is, that's what I love doing. I love getting on calls with these people. In fact, it was yesterday or the day before, Jeff called me. He says, I'm getting ready for this race and I need this and this and this. And he says, do you think you can get it ready for me? And I says, no problem. We'll get it taken care of. And that's what I love, and so ultimately, if you look at what my calling was in life, it's just like, obviously I'm a father and a husband and a grandpa, and I love all of that. But I'm helping a lot of people.
Yeah, but
And
it's the innovation thing. I don't know what it is, but
and that's where I get my joy. It's just innovating to the point to help people.
right, right. And it's this yin yang thing where it's a very selfish thing,
Right,
right? But at the
right,
same time, by being selfish and innovating, you're creating things that really move humanity forward,
right.
right?
They help other people.
That help other people.
Yeah,
Even though it was like nobody had a clue what you were doing when you started it, you
right,
had a clue, you had the
right,
spark, just like I did. Like, we got it wrong about this carb thing.
right.
And it's like, and nobody believes you. Fortunately, you had a supportive family that says, okay, your dad probably is thinking, I haven't got a clue what he's doing, but
He had faith in me though, and that was
that's
amazing,
right.
you know.
And well, and that's,
That,
that was something I had a conversation with last night over dinner about faith.
mhm.
Okay. And that's, go back to that whole thing about human stuff.
Yeah,
Humans want to control. We want to believe as
right,
a static set, but faith
right.
is like an acceptance that you don't know and you don't have control, but
Yeah,
we're going to go with this
we're
and it's
gonna
going to
go
be
with
okay.
it.
And it's going to
Yeah,
be okay.
yeah,
And that's what kind of innovation is so about. And,
right,
and I want to kind of shift this, and like what we're seeing today is, like you say, no patience, no tolerance for difficulty. When things get
right,
difficult, we can't have a conversation and start to work through it. I
right,
mean, it's like part of innovation is like when you have a problem, you got to back up maybe 3 steps and
right,
reassess things, right? It's
right,
like, the last 3 years, it's like there's been an unwillingness to say, maybe we need to rethink this,
right,
right?
right,
And it's just kind of interesting watching how the human condition is evolving into this thing. But like people who are bringing out new ideas are kind of, in whatever industry, it's kind of drying up, and we need to have that
right,
sort of environment of renaissance where that part of the human condition can kind of flourish. I mean,
right,
you see this because historically you had the Dark Ages followed by the Renaissance,
right,
right?
right,
And then we went into another thing where there's this colonialization, and that was like same thing, corporate in the form of government powers were taking
right,
over countries. And then you had these revolutions, and it's sort of
right.
like humanity seems to have to go through this stuff.
Let's go through those cycles again. Yeah,
Right, right, right. And then it's always those difficult times of war that people are forced to do hard things and forced
right,
to really use their brains.
right,
And it's like, we shouldn't have to go through this if we just apply ourselves, and we
right,
give people that space and invest in R&D.
right. And allow smaller companies to be able to do it, and that's, the patents in general, I've struggled with patents the last few years, and we have patents. But then you look at the cost to defend a patent, it's like, you got to be kidding me. What company, unless they're really large companies, going to have that kind of money to actually, defend a patent?
Yeah, and when you do a patent, basically you're putting your design right up there.
Right up there. Yeah. And a
Yeah,
lot of
like,
times it's a
okay.
blueprint for people to work around. And so it kind of, it discourages small businesses from getting started because it's so difficult to protect themselves and to try to develop a brand and develop a market, when usually the big guys just gobble them up or they just copy them. And then, I mean, and it happened to me in early stages where bigger companies would copy me, and then they would think people would think they were the first ones to do it. It's like, no, I've been doing this for a long time, and so and that's frustrating and it discourages small businesses from even getting started.
Because you don't have that voice. I've been saying this since the early 2000s, like fat is the
Right.
real fuel.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, since the Faster came out in 2015, there's all these other people, and a lot
Right.
of these are people I trained, right?
Right.
And they're better at the social media and the presenting
Right.
themselves, because
Exactly.
I want to keep pushing the envelope,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
You'd rather be out doing a run, thinking about a pattern and some things of doing things. It's like, okay. And then coming back and putting that thing. I mean, and when I go out and run, I come up with these things. And it's like these ideas, and it's like, oh man, those connections of all the different physiology.
Right.
It's like, it's hopefully I capture a few of them.
Right. Yeah. That's a fun time when the light bulb goes on though, and they come together though, isn't it?
Yeah. And it seems to be the more I do that balancing of getting out and running in nature, like the trail running. It's like,
Right.
that's what the first time I did a trail run, because like I said, when I turned 40, I decided I got to get in shape. And I was
Right.
doing mostly road running with a local running group,
Uh-huh.
club. But then they did a trail run, and I'm like, this reminds me of hunting. So I
Right.
grew up hunting. It
Okay.
was just all day on the trails doing stuff. And it just made
Right.
total sense to me.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's
And
cool.
then as I do this, and I'm sure you have those same epiphanies as you, especially with now where you are with your work,
Right.
all that, it's like you get that free random thinking, and it just, things happen.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I
and
don't know
that's
how
the
to
other
describe
thing.
it. You can't formulate that. You can't scale it. You can't monetize it.
Right. Well, and I think one thing I've over the years too is creative people versus people that maybe aren't as creative. When you try to explain something, being a creative person, everything is formulated 100% in my head. Colors, pattern pieces, shape, everything is formulated in my head. If you try to explain that to a non-creative person, and you would say, it's going to look like this, and the shape will be like this, and this piece will be red, and this piece will be like this. As I explain it to them, I'm just going through the picture in my mind, trying to explain it to them, and they'll say, what did you just say? Can you build me a sample? Can you show me a prototype? They're not capable of formulating that creativity in their head.
Yeah. And that's, yeah. And that's why I lose people when I talk
Yeah.
about what the metabolic pathway and what's doing this. And so just tell me how to do it. I'm
Right.
like, you need to understand some of the why in order to really embrace the how.
Right.
And then, what you're saying is funny, because my friend Bruce LaBelle,
Right.
he's an organic chemist, and he's
Right.
brilliant, but we'll have discussions about chemistry, right?
Right.
And
Right.
he'll be sitting there talking about a chemical molecular structure as if it's right there in front of him. He'll be
Right.
doing
Right.
this, right? The cis positions here, the trans is there, you got your
Yeah.
amine group here. And it's like, he can picture all this stuff in his head, just like you're
Right.
saying.
Right.
And, unless you're an organic chemist,
You're not going to understand it. Yeah.
you're like, this guy is like weird.
Yeah. But to him, it just makes total sense.
Right. So yeah, any ideas? Like, we know where we're going, right?
Right.
And that's the thing. It's like, when you're in that, when you're fixated on the innovation thing, it's all you can do. Like I say, it's selfish
Right.
here, but like, just like what we're talking about, it's like, ultimately what we're doing is provide huge value to humanity and the people we
Right.
serve, and make life better.
Right.
And particularly in the sport we're in,
Right.
what we're facilitating is that higher health, peak performance. Because
Right.
what we're seeing in the data and the real world experience of these people is, this is what health should be studying.
Right.
Health is studying sick people, and I'm not suggesting they don't stop studying sick people, but if all you study
Right.
are sick people, how do you know what really healthy is?
Right.
And you look at somebody like Jeff at 51, and we've got tons of athletes that are in their 50s and 60s that are just
Right.
right. And like, I don't know if you've looked at his ultra sign up stuff and then know he's done some FKTs and other stuff that
Right.
aren't on ultra sign.
Right.
He's doing something big every 6 to 8 weeks.
I know it's huge.
And he's not breaking down. And I mean, how many people have you seen come and go in the sport where they come in, they're a phenom for 3 or 4 seasons, and then
Yep.
injuries off the map?
Yeah, that's exactly, that's what happens in our sport every day. You see people that they're the 2-year phenomenon, and then they're gone.
That's right. And
Yeah.
it's like, I'm like, people burning a lot of sugar is not good. It's gonna wreck you eventually.
Right. Right.
And I'm not saying no sugar. I'm just saying burning tons of it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that just their whole training procedures too, I mean, the amount of miles that they're putting in are huge. Like I'm really good friends with Carl Meltzer, and he's won more 100-milers than anybody, and Jeff's second, but he doesn't run more than 50 miles a week, and it's just like he's able to have longevity out of it. And ultimately that's what I'm hoping people will learn through all of this. If they do really well with their nutrition, learn the fat adaptive stuff, learn to have their body be more efficient, then they'll be able to perform for a longer period of time, mostly just for longevity of life too.
Well, it's like I say, I've been saying this for a while now. It's like, whether you like it or not, you're entered in the ultimate endurance event, life.
Right.
Right. And,
right.
right.
Yeah. It's life.
It's life. And people like us are here to help allow you to get that fitness to where you can live longer and better.
Right.
Right. So it's
exactly.
a real cool thing.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So let's just talk briefly about, how we can encourage people to be early adopters, because innovators are these weird guys, mostly guys. It's not that women can't be innovators, but like to a point, there's a very well-known feminist academic. So who says this? He says, when you look at the data, women tend to clump to the middle of the IQ intelligence spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, this is the reason why you don't have a lot of women Jack the Rippers, for the same reason you don't have a lot of female Mozarts.
Right.
So yeah, there's clumping. So, you're not going to have this big pool of innovators, but we do need to foster that.
Right.
But at the same time, what we need to do is also foster people to, assuming that in the data set of the human population, that innovation spectrum is very small. What we really want to talk about now is like somebody like Jeff, who's an early adopter. We need to foster early adoption as much as we need to foster innovation, because it's the early adopters who help get innovation off the ground, because they're the ones that are going to be those first customers in the cycle to bring that early majority and then the late majority on to adopt change. Any ideas on that?
That's kind of the marketing struggle, isn't it? Because I've kind of
you're
world.
Working with early. I mean, Jeff's an early adopter of both of what we're doing, right? And and it's working for him.
It's working, and I think that as the sport grows, obviously more people will get into it, and they'll realize that they need to adapt to things earlier in their career if they want to take it seriously. But I think that also trying to figure out, and that's the challenge that I've always had when I go to a trade show, I talk way above a lot of people's heads when it comes to the packs and things like that. Whereas my salespeople, they'll distill it down to like the 3 most important things. They call it our DNA. And for me, the way has been to get a great sales team and a great marketing team behind me so that they can take what's in my brain, distill it down to the 3 most critical things that people need to understand. And if they will truly understand those, I can't expect them to understand the 50 things that are spinning through my brain. But if you can distill it down to a small amount, then they're able to understand the basic things and they're able to adopt earlier. And that's what's happening.
How many times has your marketing team told you to dumb it down?
Oh, I know. And they love, and I do my technical videos and we film those and stuff like that. And it trains our sales team and so forth. But the reality is only a certain people, and this was a hard lesson for me to learn. Only certain people are interested or will take the time to listen to me talk for 30 minutes about one pack, and so being able to just kind of, I call it, not really dumb it down, but kind of distill it down to the bare necessities, then that has been really helpful. Distill it down to that has really
I'm going through that process now because, and how it goes, because once you start talking a topic, you think of some other factor involved in it, then another one. Once you go down that rabbit, and it just leads to all these things, and your brain is just, and people are and people's eyes are glazing over.
Right. And
But
so,
it's-
and yeah, it is. They're glazing over. And so, and that's difficult for innovators because there's so much passion in the thought process, but it also is kind of, if you're talking to an innovator, it's kind of a window into their mind to illustrate all the things that they had to think through in order to get to where they ended, because it's very complex. Very
well,
complex.
and that's why people either reverse engineer or acquire,
Yep.
because it's way easier to pay a premium or just blatantly rip something off than, and those people who do that, they haven't even got a clue where to start with all that thought process.
Well, and they don't know why they're ripping stuff off. They just think it works. And so, but I think that to answer your question, I think that we have to figure out how to distill down the most critical things. Usually it's like three things. People's brains will allow like three things to come in. What are the three most important things you need to tell them about this? And then they'll understand it. And then we can get more people into it.
It's called the power of three.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep. No, and I also think that what we also, like I said, about fostering innovation, we need to foster more early adopters. And it's
Right.
about, I think that one of the things that has to happen out there is we've got, because people are so, what I call ensconced in this human construct now of modern life. We not only don't have patience, we don't like the pain of doing things hard, but a lot of things now are driven off of fear-based marketing.
Right.
You look at health, politics, religion, it's not about what they're offering, it's fear of the
Yeah.
unknown or
Right.
the other.
Absolutely.
Right. And when you get fear in people, you lose curiosity. People
Right.
don't become curious and their minds aren't open. They become fixated on that fear because it's fight or
Right.
flight.
Right.
And one of the great things about Jeff is he's so laid back and he's got such a good vibe to him that people can relate to.
Right.
That guard goes down.
Right.
And then they're accepting to what he's saying. And that needs to be another thing that needs to really start to be worked towards, because that's what's going to get those early adopters. Because early adopters, yeah, it works, fine. But then there's going to be some early adopters who are going to want to know a little bit more or a lot more.
Right.
But those are the people who are going to advocate, like you say, they're going to be the ones that are going to distill it down to a larger group of adopters to start to create that critical.
Well, and I think that's really insightful, using Jeff as an example. I think that people want to see that you're human, I'm human, Jeff Browning's human. And those people like Jeff, we just finished a documentary on him and running the Moab 240. And it's raw. He's a real person, and he has real feelings and he has faults and he has struggles and he gets cold and he gets hypothermia. And I think the way we can get other people into it is to realize that the people that they immortalize, that kind of put on a pedestal, are real human too. And they have the same struggles that we all have.
They're relatable. That's exactly right. And
relatable.
Yeah. Right. And people want to relate, and they look at Jeff and they say, he's superhuman. He's a freak.
Yeah.
And it's like he'll tell you he's not. I mean, and I don't want to bag on his brother, but his brother is a Midwestern guy with the average population challenges.
Right.
His parents were hardworking farming family. They followed the government guidelines, and guess what it did?
Right.
So his genes aren't. It's like his genetic.
Right.
He doesn't have some special genetics that separate him from most people.
Right.
And so, but people don't know that. They just see this Jeff Browning doing these incredible things.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, Jeff's just been patient. He's been working hard. And he came to that point in his career, like with the fat adaptation, he came to a point in his career where he was ready to give it up, the competitive part of it, because he was in struggle. And it's like, okay, I got to consider something different. And that's the thing. It's like I think one of the things is people have to be curious to try new things. And that's one of the things that's kind of not happening, because it's just become and I think people need to take back their sovereignty of both their thinking and their bodies. And I think ultra running gets it out there because like you said about Jeff with the Moab 240 or just what we do, it's raw,
Right. Yeah.
right? You face struggle, but then you get to the top of that mountain
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like, wow, I did this.
It all came together. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then on the way down, something else comes into your brain. It's like,
Right.
and I'm hoping that we can, make that difference because like there's a lot of so-called experts just trying to maintain their position of expertise as things change, and they don't want that to change because it challenges their dominance in that sport, and it's just sad,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm glad to see you're thriving because I one of the things I want to mention is as a kid growing up, and I don't know if you remember this, but here on the West Coast, we used to go to San Francisco on occasion
Right.
and go to downtown San Francisco. And this was back in the era, like at the very end of when Abercrombie and Fitch and Eddie Bauer were real outfitting companies,
Right.
right? They were before North Face got started.
Right.
And, you would go to down in Union Square and on Post Street where Abercrombie and Fitch and Eddie Bauer were, and they were catering to these rich San Francisco people who would go on safaris and treks.
Right.
And they were building hardcore things. And then they got bought up by these New York clothing companies, and they just took the brand and left the real technical stuff. You see how that's been transformed.
Right.
Yeah,
that happens a lot with brands, doesn't it? Where they
yeah,
start off a certain way and then they become a little bit mainstream when they're bought out, and then they kind of lose their identity because what got them to where they went to, is lost.
yeah. And I don't know where North Face is now, but I know that I have to give them a lot of credit because
Yes.
up until recent, at least, I don't know where it is now because I haven't checked in, but in the
Right.
a couple of years ago, they were still dedicated to making good technical wear
Right.
and good technical gear, but they'd also been able to leverage that brand beautifully
Right.
into more mainstream clothing, but they were committed to keeping that
The
hardcore gear
hardcore brand,
going.
and their stuff it's good quality, high quality things for
Right.
sure.
And that's one of the few companies that realizes it's like their technical gear is their R&D.
Right.
Right. And they get that if they drop their technical gear just to do the mainstream, they would follow the same path as Abercrombie and Fitch and Eddie Bauer, which are now
Right.
kind of, they're not doing what because there
Right.
was that
What they
quick
started.
when they made that transformation, it was that typical quick money because they
Mhm.
were leveraging the brand on cheaper soft goods rather than
Right.
technical goods. Right. And
Right.
North Face has resisted that.
Yeah. They've done a really
Yeah.
good job maintaining.
Any mainstream ideas you guys are entertaining to kind of open it up?
No, we really feel, and I've done this over the years, with the companies I've worked in. Sometimes we think, oh, we can make anything, let's try this bag, let's try this bag. And we haven't been really successful at trying to go down mainstream with our products. We've just stayed focused. We're okay staying focused. And that's our
You
plan.
know
for
your
the future.
niche.
We know our niche. We know our niche, and we stay in our niche. And I make I make backpacks for myself. I make backpacks for my kids and grandkids, and some of them are pretty cool, and it's like, oh, we could make this and we could make this. And it's like, well, it's not really our niche though.
Well, your grandkids are so lucky because I'm sure you have them there helping you sew them together, right?
Yeah, yes. They're still really young. They're all under 5 at this point, but
They
yes,
got a crazy grandfather.
exactly. Crazy grandpa, and all of my grandkids get their first backpack from grandpa. So
And you made it.
make it. Yeah.
How rare is that? That's pretty innovative in these
Yeah.
days.
It's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad you're enjoying life to the fullest, man.
Yeah. It's good.
That's
It's
great to
good.
hear. Yeah.
And it's go ahead.
What store, what's your distribution like? We want to give a shout out so that people can, they can go to ultraspire.com, or they can go to Vespa.com. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yes.
But if they
Yes,
want to go to a,
ultraspire.com. We're in specialty run stores. There's some great ones all around the country, Running Warehouse, REI.
so
You know,
you're in the specialty retail box store. So Running Warehouse,
specialty,
REI.
yeah, specialty retail stores running specialty stores has been our main distribution channels. And so just local specialty running stores, you can find our products or just go to ultraspire.com.
Okay, so ultraspire.com, and if you're out there and you want to know where your handheld water bottles come, you can thank Bryce for that, and he's got a whole bunch of new stuff that's actually pretty neat. I'm going to stick with my old Ultimate Endurance bottles. I'm used to them.
They
I'm
work.
just used to them. It's like,
You know,
pulling them out with my teeth, taking a sip, slamming the other bottle.
yeah, the reality is we're creature, and the older I get, the more I'm a creature of habit too. It's just like I have my routines and they work.
Except with our minds. It's like,
I know.
I'm still noodling on stuff, and I'm trying to get content. I'm trying to stay focused to get my content together, because I've got all this content over all these years. I haven't taken it that last mile to be able to monetize it.
Right.
And it's like, I got to just get this stuff done. It's just like half scribbled paragraphs of this topic or that topic. And it's like, I got to stop this stuff and get it down. And then it'll allow me to do more reading of papers. I've got so many tabs open on my computers of papers I'm looking.
That's cool. You got a creative mind and it's always working.
Oh yeah. And it's like bringing all this stuff. It's like every time I read something, it's like, oh, that could be happening over here and this and happen. It's, the deal.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Like when somebody presents you with a new fabric or a new fabric or strap material
Buckles,
or
straps.
buckles, magnets,
Mhm.
because I'm a gearhead. I mean, it's the whole physiology and stuff. It's no different than building an engine for your car or building a pack. It's just all this stuff that, gearheads, you want to just kind of dive in. So
concept to reality. It's the same in all industries, going from a thought to a reality.
Well, very cool, Bryce. And I'm glad to hear
thank you so much.
You're interested in how long have you been doing fat adaptation?
I've actually been doing it a long time, because, and how I got into it, it's kind of a funny story. I set some FKTs on like some mountain biking trails early on. And this was right when goo energy gel first came out, and I use goo, but to do a long mountain bike ride, this one in particular, it's the White Rim Trail, I did it and I needed 30 packets of energy gel, but I do everything solo self-supported. I don't do a lot of, races where there's a lot of aid stations. So I have to carry everything with me. And so I had 30 packets of gel, and it's like, okay, every time I would eat it, I can't litter, I'd shove it down my cycling jersey. And so at the end of this 8-hour bike ride, I've got this jersey full of gels, and I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And I just realized through training that if I could go out, and I started with doing 2 and 3 hour bike rides with just water only, and then I'd go 4 and 5 hours, and then 6 hours with water only. And then I realized that by doing that, I could go down to just like 1 packet of gel an hour, and I was fine. And and then I could go super high output, all day, super high output. And that was early on. And a lot of it was because I was tired of carrying so much gel with me. It's got to make the body work.
Yeah. So we've got a bunch of things we can help you to tweak that. But see, here's another person who's doing it successfully, and
it absolutely works. In fact, what I'm training for now, I came off a little bit of a sore knee a few months ago, and then I had a hernia, and I've come back from that. But my mileage now, I'm doing 2 to 3 hour runs, at least once a week. And I'm purposely, I just drink water, and that's it. And it's no problem. I don't bonk. I don't feel fatigued.
We'll just get you add a little Vespa in, some salt, and and with the water, and you'll be
good.
Be golden.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
So nice talking with you. I sure appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this. This is a great conversation. It's a necessary one, because, like that paper I sent you, innovation is
on a
struggling,
decline,
and it's pretty clear, but nobody has a set business answer to do it. It's just like people have to have that environment and that motivation and the space
Right.
to run, because it's messy.
Right.
That's how it happens. So
Right. Right.
great.
Awesome.
Well, once again, Bryce Thatcher, a true innovator in his sphere at ultraspire.com. And he's also fat adapted. And as we said, we have an early adopter in common with Jeff Browning. Who else maybe do we have in common?
Peter Mortimer is also with us.
Peter. Okay. Well, there
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
Two guys who can sustain over 2 grams a minute
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
guys that are
Yeah.
early adopters. And so people need to get curious, because what's working for them is really working for them.
Yeah. It's working. Yeah. And it requires a lot of discipline, it does. But once you hone in and it's a change. Like Jeff, he comes over at our house and we eat the same. Our meals are the same, our food's the same, we eat the same, but it's different than the world. No processed foods, you just have to make a fundamental lifestyle change, and that's how they're performing so well.
Well, yeah. And the thing is like, and that's why I tell people, it's like, all I'm doing is getting people back to the physiology and metabolism that we're meant to have. This is the robust health that we were gifted with.
This is our ancestors. Yeah.
This is our ancestors. And, it's like I said, it's the environment, stupid.
Right. Exactly.
And we've there's just all these unintended consequences where our own natural physiology in the modern environment is our undoing.
Right.
Like whereas when we get us back to the environment that shaped us, our metabolism and physiology really work for us.
Right.
To give us that robust health. But in the modern thing, it works against us. And Jeff's genetic pool is a perfect example of how that works. So
right.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And it's good to see that, and that's the thing. It's like part of that whole innovation track is, yeah, we can't, we're like a dog with a bone. We can't get rid of it. But part of that drive is to make things better and to, provide, those discoveries that solve the problems to make, humanity a better place.
Right. That's awesome.
All right. Well, thanks
so
very
much.
much, Bryce. And thank you all for listening.